Hello everyone, good afternoon. My name is Amnon. I'll write it here. So for those of you who are not familiar with the name, you'll have it here in front of you. Those who are sitting in the back, can you see what I write on the whiteboard? Not really, huh? Yeah? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Okay, what we'll try to do in the hour that we have, an hour and a little more than an hour, we're going to talk a little bit about innovation. Of course, as it applies to social enterprises or social businesses and to what you're interested in here. I'll tell you very briefly about myself. I've been working for the past 17 years in a company called SIT, which stands for Systematic Inventive Thinking. And what we do is we help organizations be more innovative in the way they work. And we work in the business world, and we also work in the social world, and of course in the in-between world of social enterprises. We're based in Tel Aviv. That's where I'm from Israel originally, and that's where we started the company 17 years ago. But today we work in about 60 countries, and I personally, with my family, we're living now for a few months in Bogota, in Colombia. So we have quite a lot of experience in working in Latin America, but also in other parts of the world. We ourselves are kind of a mixed kind of company. We're a business. We work with businesses. Among other things, we try to make money. But since the inception of the business, I came from social work and education, and so did some of my other partners. And from way at the beginning, we kind of made a decision that it was easier to hire people who are coming from social and education backgrounds and teach them business than hire people who are coming from the business and trying to get them over to the type of values that come from social education. So we have kind of a mixed company of people who have background in education and other things, and then we apply a lot of that to the business world. But meanwhile, in 17 years, we've learned a lot from the business world, and when we work with organizations that are not businesses, we try to apply that as well, the other way around. And so it's kind of, as I said, it's kind of a mix. Some of our projects are kind of classic cases of social intervention. We have part of projects for reproductive health in India and reproductive health in Zambia and Africa. And some of our projects are kind of in the space, the gray area. Let's say we work with SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises in various countries, help entrepreneurs create their businesses. And sometimes their businesses are totally business, and sometimes they're social, and sometimes they're social businesses, and sometimes they're actually NGOs of some kind or other. And we work with regular companies on their businesses in which we see a very strong tendency that companies who are totally, supposedly not social businesses, becoming more aware and more interested in the social aspects of what they do. And because our job is innovation, so you could ask, what's one thing got to do with the other? If our specialty is innovation, what does it have to do with social interests of a company, of a Coca-Cola or a Kraft or a Nestle or one of these multinationals? Because our definition of innovation is the ability to think and act differently in a useful way. That's how we've always defined innovation for us. Think and act differently in a useful way. So if you think about it, when you want to transform the thinking of a company so that they will be more aware of the second and third bottom lines, then it's actually an act of innovation. They have to overcome the way that they've been doing things in the past. So in our terms, this is helping them innovate in a certain way. And then there's another element that we're going to talk about today, that there are certain characteristics of the human mind that make it difficult for people to innovate in general. And these characteristics, they come into play exactly in the same way if you're a medical device company that needs to figure out a new way on the new generation of your medical device, or if you're a company that's trying to figure out a way to solve the problems of water in a village in Africa. The same mental tendencies that make one try to do things the same way, old way, again and again, they kick in, doesn't matter what your subject matter is. So basically, some of the things I'm going to talk about today are just things about the human mind. And wherever you apply them, they're applicable, regardless of the context. By the way, in parentheses, I say that sometimes the subject comes up if innovation is good for humanity or bad for humanity. And actually, innovation, like any other tool, like a hammer, it can be used to build a house or to destroy a house or to throw it at someone's head. So innovation, in a sense, is just a strong refinement of some tools that we have, and you can then either use them for kind of beneficial purposes or the opposite. So that's a little bit about me and about our company. And I think now let's just get into the thing itself. And are you willing to start with an exercise? Yeah? Good. Okay, so let's, you know what, just to start moving the cogs in the brain a little bit, stand up, please. And look around the room behind you, and here from Columbia University, raise your hand. Okay, good. And those who aren't can imagine they probably have been to a university in their life or a couple of times. So the task is the following. Let's imagine that you want to communicate some message from the social environment. Let's say you want to convey the message. I read recently that many people in the US still don't believe that there is global warming. I know it sounds strange, but apparently it's true that some people still don't believe it. So let's say you want to deliver, communicate throughout campus the message that there really is such a thing as global warming, okay? And you want to do it creatively, okay? So you have 3 minutes with your partner to invent creative ways of conveying this message here in the Columbia University campus. Is the task clear? Go, 3 minutes, please. I apologize for cutting short your bursts of creativity, but just so that we can continue. Let's please very quickly hear a couple of examples of things that you came up with. Okay? Please.
We came up with an incentive program. So there are some people they still drive to the city since it's a city campus. As an incentive, we'll tell them remove your footprint for the day. So they'll give you like a Metro card for the day or something
Great.
for the LIR.
Thank you.
We decided to turn up the heating at university for a whole week and make it volunteer every day. And every time someone calls housekeeping, they just say, we don't know what it is, we can't do anything. And at the end of the week, we'll have pictures of places where it's actually really happening with 1940 and 2012.
Cool.
And then we say, okay, you thought it was hot this week, imagine this.
Right. It's not cool, it's hot. Sorry. Yeah.
Get a couple students to get severe sunburns and walk around the sign saying, has anyone seen the ozone layer? Preferably scantily clad.
Excellent. Thank you. Another one.
We figure since most climate skeptics and deniers tend to be conservative, we pick a spokesperson that they respect, is the Department of Defense. Since they have absolutely no doubt that climate change is real and they're investing in all the things that will make them adapt to it, they should be the spokesperson to reach that crowd.
Thank you. You've got some cool ideas. Wait, you'll have a chance to express a few more. But now let's do the following. But for that, what I'll ask you to do, I'm going to write stuff on the whiteboard. So what you do is now grab the nearest chair, stay with your partner, don't go look for your property. Just sit down wherever, and we'll continue with exercise, and then you'll find your belongings again afterwards, okay? So just sit down for a moment so we don't waste time.
Which part of Portugal are you from? Brazil. Okay, I did the El Camino de
Okay, now, sorry, wait. Yes, what we're going to do, we're going to make a list, what we call a list of components, okay? What do I mean? I'm going to ask you, what things are there in the Columbia University campus? What are the components of, if someone would look from way up, what would they see in the Columbia University campus? So give me a quick list, please. Buildings. Professors. Sorry? Box? Ah, books. Sorry. Books. Yeah. Trees. Walkways.
Janitorial staff.
Janitors. Sunbathing. Birds. Cars. Cafeteria. Statues. Squirrel. That's nice. What else? Students, no? Interesting omission that was. What else? Thought leaders. Toilets. Dorms. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to repeat the exercise we did before, okay? But now each pair will receive a number. The number represents one of the components, and what you need to do is repeat the exercise, but this time the only resource you're allowed to use, or the main resource you need to use in order to communicate the message, will be whatever number you got, okay? So very quickly, I'm just going to assign numbers so that they won't be repeated. So you're sitting in your pairs, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If I miss somehow, grab a number around 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay? Everyone knows their number? If you don't understand what's written there, it's because it's in Hebrew. Get closer and you can see it. Okay? If you need to move. If you're sitting with your partner and you're comfortable, stay there. And you have 3 minutes, and you need to communicate the same message as before, but the resource that you're going to use in order to communicate is whatever. If it's the books, it's the books. If it's the thought leader, if it's the toilet, it's the toilet. Okay? Go. And if you have a question, go. Let's hear a couple of your ideas. Yes, please.
So we had dorms, and we were thinking of doing a series of natural disasters in all the dorms. So you can flood them, you could shut all the power off and say that because of some, I don't know,
Okay, thank you. We got the idea. You don't have to get into all the grisly details. We understood that. Yes, please.
So we had tree, and our idea was having a public funeral for the tree.
Okay. Yes, please.
Yeah, we have books, and what we are going to make the covers like a sweaty cover. So when you open the book, it says, "I'm just sweating."
Okay.
So it just say, "I'm just."
Yes, please.
So we had walkaways, and we were thinking
Walkaways.
of having like footprints on the floor, which says what is your carbon footprint, but like with a scale. So you took a shower this morning, so you already have this, and then you took a car to come to the university. So
Okay. Thank you. Others? Yes.
So we had trees, and Sonali had amazing ideas around building a tree house where you can go in and learn about climate change, and also distributing seeds for people to plant.
Thank you.
I think our group is professor. I think, and we decided to let the professor wear different T-shirts and have his images and slogans to
Thank you. They can also smell the teachers.
We had building, and I had a great idea that we would have like clocks, and we would fill the entire building with the clock so that it could show like carbon dioxide emissions.
Okay. Very graphic. Yes.
We had professors, and we had the idea that professors should put on bathing suits with signs, and there's a common walkway here, and sort of parade around the walkway, you know, saying global warming is here. Or something like that.
Others? Yes?
We had birds, so we said you could have speakers playing like the beautiful bird songs of birds that were about to go extinct, and as people kind of walked up to read about it, like the sounds would go off, and they would get like play with some like rainforest getting chopped down.
Okay, very well. Now, what I want to call your attention is the following. Imagine that you're a group that needs to, now I'm going to talk in the context of communication, but then we'll see that it's not necessarily only for communication. You're a group that needs to come up with ideas for something. For example, like in this task, there's like 40 of you. Let's compare what happened in the first round and the second round. Okay? In terms of diversity of ideas and of getting the maximum from a group, where do you see an advantage, in the first round or the second round? In the second round. Why? More specific per each one, more diverse in total, but more specific per each one. Now, where was it easier to find an idea quickly, in the first one or in the second? Now it depends. For some people in the first, they immediately had something. For many people, normally in the second. Now, for anyone who found it easier in the second, it's actually a bit of a strange phenomenon, because any idea that you could think of in the second, you could have in principle thought of in the first as well. But there's something in the way the mind works that makes it easier to focus in the second rather than the first. So in a moment, I'm going to show you some examples of what happened when you were inventing ideas in the second. I also demonstrate to you that some of your ideas in the first were actually of the second type. And I'll show you what I mean by that. But before that, I want to show you why is it difficult to come up with ideas in what we call creative or innovative ideas in the first place. Because one of the interesting things about innovation, I've been personally working for 17 years in this area, and I've had the experience to work, I think, in 30 countries and in hundreds of organizations. And it's pretty universal that when you ask people how important is innovation for them or for their organization, they rate it very highly. Let's say from 1 to 10, normally the average is about 8 or 8 and something. And when you ask them to rate how innovative they are in practice, what happens normally? How do they rate it? Much lower. So normally it's like 5 or 6. And you ask yourself, why is there this gap? Intelligent people, motivated people, why is it so difficult for them to innovate? So one of the explanations why it's so difficult to innovate has to do with this exercise that you just did. And there was an experiment that was done about 80 years ago by a social scientist called Karl Duncker in Switzerland. And he took a group of people to a room with a wall made of wood. And each person got a candle. And the task of the people was to somehow attach the candle to the wall in a way that it would be stable and wouldn't fall down and wouldn't burn the wall. And the people asked what resources they were allowed to use. So they got a few thumbtacks and matches. So thumbtacks that you stick into the wall, and matches. And what did 80-something% of the people immediately do in this exercise? They try to tack the candle to the wall, or they lit the candle and used the wax as a kind of glue. In both cases, normally it fell down. Now, take another group, same wall, same candle, same task. And when they ask what are the resources available, they get the same thumbtacks and the same box of matches. Okay? Everything you see is identical except that the box of matches here, it's empty and the matches are beside it. What do 80-something% of the people do here? Exactly. They take the box, they tack it to the wall as an elegant little shelf, and they put a candle on it. Okay? And now, Dunker asked himself why this strange phenomenon that everything was here the same, and why don't people come up with this solution here? And he termed this phenomenon functional fixedness. And the definition of functional fixedness is the tendency of the human brain to ascribe specific functions to specific objects, and the difficulty of breaking the mold and thinking that this object can fulfill a different kind of function. Now, in the 80s, something years since he did this experiment, the phenomenon of functional fixedness has been researched all over the world, and what they find is that regardless of age, gender, culture, country, everyone suffers from functional fixedness. And an interesting question that we ask ourselves is, why is functional fixedness so strong? And two answers that we give to it is, the first reason that functional fixedness is so strong is that it works really well. Like in 95, 99% of the things you do in life, it's better to have functional fixedness because it's much more convenient and much more practical. For example, when I came into this room, I didn't ask myself, maybe I'll use this black thing to screen on, and this to talk into, and this to write on the board. Because functional fixedness immediately made me use everything for what it's supposed to be used. So it's a much more practical thing than a creature without functional fixedness would waste a lot of time trying out talking into this until they came to the conclusion that it's better to talk into this. Okay? Now, but what's the catch? The catch is what happens when you want to do something that's not what you normally do. Or even worse, you could say, if you're driving a car and there's a reason to stop the car immediately, what does functional fixedness make you do? Hit the brake. And it's good, because without functional fixedness, you would try the air conditioning maybe, or the radio, or open the window. So that's how functional fixedness is kind of a survival element. But what happens if you hit the brake and it doesn't stop the car? What does a person normally do? What does functional fixedness make you do? Hit the brake again. And if you think of organizations, what do organizations do when they have the analogous situation of trying to stop the car hitting the brakes? They spend more money hitting the brake again and again until they crash. And so the trick with functional fixedness, and that's where it connects to inventive thinking, that inventive thinking or innovation doesn't mean break all your rules and forget the functional fixedness, because that would be a stupid strategy for going about in life. Innovation means the ability to switch in and out of functional fixedness as the case may be. And the reason that it's so difficult is, to switch out of functional fixedness, one is because it's so useful, so you're kind of all the time reinforced to be functionally fixed. And second, because if you think of education, in the context of university, it's interesting to think about it, education is mainly burning functional fixednesses into the student. Because when you teach people the proper way to do things, now I'm a father now of 3 girls. Thank you for the congratulations. And you see, when my first daughter, when she was 2.5 years old, and raise your hand if you have children here. Okay, a few, yeah. So those of you who have will understand the situation that she's playing around with the food in the dinner table. and I tell her, don't play with the food. And she asks me, why? Why not play with the food? And then I hear myself saying to her, because food is for eating and games are for playing. And when I say that, I say to myself, I can't believe I just said that. That's the argument that I can give her, is because, functional fixing, that's it. Things are for this, things are for this, remember it. Now, on the other hand, you do want her to not eat the toys and not play with the food. So it's a real dilemma. And if you think about it, you're learning, studying in the university, you'll go to work somewhere, the first thing they tell you, forget everything they taught you in the university, we'll show you how it's really done in real life. What does it mean when they show you how it's done in real life? It means they start giving you all the functional fixednesses of how they do things today. So they tell you, when we hired you, we're looking for an innovative, creative kind of person. And at the same time, they're telling you, this is the way we do things at Johnson & Johnson. This is the way we do things in HP, etc. Okay? So functional fixedness is so strong because it saves us and because most of our education is designed to create functional fixedness. So when we come to innovate, and I gave you just, the exercise was just a small example, when you think of communicating, you think of using the stuff you usually would use for communicating. And when you train yourself to break your fixedness, one of the techniques to do it, and we call this technique task unification. We say task unification is when you assign a new task to an existing resource. Assigning a new task to an existing resource, we call it task unification, is one technique to break one's functional fixedness, because you force yourself to say, I would never have thought that the toilets are my resource to communicate the message of global warming, but actually heating the thing that you sit on the toilet can be maybe an impactful way of telling people that the globe is warming up. So this is one example of a type of technique that can be used to break functional fixedness. Now, interesting point, I think, that you can identify that in addition to functional fixednesses, people have other types of fixedness, and you have various techniques that can help people break various types of fixedness. So I want to demonstrate to you, give you a few examples of how functional fixedness can be broken. And my first examples will be from the world of communication. Here, it's in London. The people in the back, can you see? It's the campaign that says London is running out of blood. And they took the double-deck red buses of London and used them to communicate. If you think about it as a task unification, what is the resource that they used here and gave it a new task? You could say the bus, but what specifically about the bus?
The visibility.
The visibility and the color of the bus, and the fact that everyone knows that the bus should be red. This is from Singapore, where they have messages about breast cancer printed on the bras. This is a pretty shocking one from India. Can you see what it's in a cafe? And it says, children live in places you would never imagine. This is from Brazil. It's a shopping cart in a supermarket. Help an athlete go to the Paralympics, make a donation. Where they're using the shopping cart as their resource. Talking about toilets, this was done in London. It's about, this is a urinal. And when you go and do what you're doing on a urinal, this is heat-sensitive ink. So don't drink and drive becomes don't drink and die. Okay? Actually, we thought that it would be more interesting if it were alcohol sensitive. So the message would appear only if you had more than X amount of alcohol in your urine. This is Amnesty International using, how do you call it, the cover of a sewer in a city. And the message on the person's hands is wrong faith. This is another from the series. Using fences that are there in the city and putting people behind bars. Photos of political prisoners for Amnesty. This is in South Africa a campaign against against the fact that it's so easy to buy firearms in South Africa. So what they did, beside the vending machines for the soft drinks and stuff, they put vending machines where supposedly you could buy guns. This is from the UK. It's an outdoor kind of billboard that you don't see the message because it's covered with clothes. And there's a ladder. And after a while, all the clothes disappear, and then you see the message. Now you know how desperate homeless people are to keep warm. From New Zealand, one of these buttons that you press for the traffic lights to change, and it says, "The world could end this easily. Speak out against nuclear testing." It's a Greenpeace campaign. Okay, so these are examples of how you can use the task unification idea when you're looking for effective ways to communicate or different ways to communicate. But the principle of using task unification or of breaking functional fixedness can be used much more widely than just to communicate messages. And I wanted to show you an example. Sorry. Look at this video. And please don't be shy to stand up or move if you can't see the video well, okay? So basically what we've seen in this movie that if you think about it, recycling is task unification. It's a specific case of task unification. Reusing, repurposing, recycling, all these words, they are specific cases of task unification. It's when you hadn't realized before that the resource, the reason that you were fixed is that you had used it already. So you were not open to the thought that you can use it again. Basically, all the reuse, recycle, repurpose require a certain breaking of a fixedness that something, because that it has been used, it can still be used again. Okay? So actually, in parentheses, I'll tell you what happened to us as a company. We were not aware of, and especially aware of environmental issues or green issues, but our philosophy about innovation in general was making use as much as possible of existing resources. So when the green movement started to be strong, we suddenly noticed that the same philosophy that we were using from other reasons, totally, just because we were trying to help people break their fixedness, actually fit in perfectly well with the environmental ideas of reusing resources and doing what you can with the resources you have. Because if you think about it, what's the most common phrase, the cliche about creativity or innovation? What do people say? Think what? Out of the box. We say that our method for what we preach to the world is innovate inside the box. Because if you think about it, thinking outside the box always assumes that if you want to do new stuff, it has to be out there, outside of what you already have. So there's something in this philosophy that says if you want to advance, if you want to do new stuff, you can never be satisfied with what you already have. In order to innovate, you need to think outside the box. You have to go out and bring more stuff into the box. While if you think about it from this perspective, we say innovate inside the box. The interesting ideas are actually in what we call the principle of the closed world. The principle of the closed world says the more you think inside the box, the more inventive your ideas are. Because instead of looking for something that you don't have, you look at what you do have, but you force yourself to see it from a different angle or give it a new twist or do something else with what you already have. So try to think of, now this, we try to preach it to the GEs and HPs of the world, but think about it in the context of social enterprise, where there is nearly by definition a scarcity of resources, and see that the concept of innovating inside the box fits perfectly to situations where there's scarcity of resources. And actually, because we have the experience to work very much in different cultures, one of the interesting things is in which cultures certain types of fixedness are easier or more difficult to break. For example, this week I've been working in the US, but these weeks I'm living in Colombia. So let's say I work with two commercial companies, one in the US and one in Colombia. Where do you think I find it easier to teach task unification and breaking functional fixedness, in Colombia or in the US?
Colombia.
Where is it easier, would you say? Colombia. Why? Because the scarcity of resources is part of their life. Of course, it depends who in Colombia, but in general, as a culture. In the US, especially in corporate US, you have proper ways of doing things. If you need something, there's a budget for that something that you need. You use the budget, and you create the specific tool or the specific instrument or unit or whatever it is. While in Colombia, they much more naturally accept this thought that, yes, they would like to have something perfect, but they don't have, so let's make do with what we do. But on the other hand, I'll give you another aspect of it. Functional fixedness doesn't apply only to things. It applies also to systems, etc., but it also applies to people. What's functional fixedness in terms of a person or of people? Yes, but how does it come to play as the fixedness? How do you see functional fixedness applied to human beings?
Habit.
Yeah, people have habits, but if you think about it from the organization's point of view, functional fixedness is that this guy can't do the job because he studied accounting, and here you need an MBA. Or this lady can't do it because she studied in I don't know, Westchester County and not in Harvard or in Columbia or whatever. So all of these, in a sense, it's the same as saying that a certain element can't be used to communicate or can't be used to solve a problem. You say a certain person can or cannot. So one of the interesting elements about Colombia society, is there anyone here from Colombia? Okay. So I can invent whatever I want. But because this, what I'm going to say to you now sounds as if I invented it, but it's true. In Colombia, the society is divided into 6 strata. Estrato, they call it social strata. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And each person officially has a number tagged to them, to which stratus they belong. So, and there is a logic to it. The interesting thing about fixedness, there's always a logical explanation. And here the logical explanation is it determines how much tax, local tax you're going to pay, and you get all kinds of benefits if you're from the lower strata, etc. So there is a logic behind it. But in practice, what it means is people walking around basically with a number on their here. It's not really written here, but with a number. And that number determines in many ways, their social mobility, their possibility of getting a job, et cetera, et cetera. So that type of functional fixes is much stronger in the Colombian culture than in the US culture. But if you think about it cognitively, it's the same structural, it's the same type of fixedness, which we call functional fixedness, just being applied to different realms. Okay? So talking about task unification for communicating messages, we saw the examples, but task unification can be used also for a variety of inventions of products, of services, of solutions to problems. So I'll show you a few of the examples, just to understand how it plays out. And then okay, this is a pretty famous one. You've seen the play pump in Africa. Why is this a task unification? For those who know, tell those who don't know, yes?
You are allowing the kids to play, but at the same time they are helping the community to pump the water.
Exactly. So actually, there are two resources here that got a new task. One is the kids, got the task of pumping water, and second is the playground got the task of translating the kids' energy into pumping water. You know the socket, it's called, it's a soccer ball that you kick it and it has piezoelectric components that transform the kicking into energy, and it can store the energy in batteries that they can use afterwards in the village. Similar ideas is turning surfaces into energy converters. So I've seen versions where in discotheque, when you dance on them, it creates energy. Here is roads that can either piezoelectrically, again, by the movement of the cars or by the sun. So there are roads that are designed as surfaces for solar energy. This is an example of an application on a laptop of kinetic keyboard that collects energy while you type on it. This is a whole different thing, is using, you know, these pages that open up in your internet when a page not found. So they're using it to put pictures of children that are lost, that have been lost. So they say that the most important thing for helping find children that are lost is to expose their photo as widely as possible. And so they get internet providers to put photos of child not found instead of not found error, regular not found error message. Now, okay, another example. This is the same electricity in Brazil, a program where prisoners pedal on bicycles and they create energy. One of the interesting things about task unifications is that they often create kind of win-win-win solutions. The prisoners get exercise, they keep out of trouble, they get points that they can accumulate, and it gives them all kinds of benefits, and there's an energy saving, etc. This is in a supermarket or anywhere where you take a number and wait in line. So here you get the number 27,951, and it says that would be your position if you were in line waiting to receive an organ transplant. So to give you the feeling of how difficult it is, how long you need to wait for an organ transplant. This is the last example here that I'm going to mention. CAPTCHA. You know this thing that you want to go into some website and they show you letters and you need to type which letters you saw? You know why you need to type those? because it's to show that you're not a robot that's creating spam, that only a human being can read it. So how did they use this? What's the task unification here? What are they using it for?
These are words that something could not capture, so the human is actually using it.
Exactly. So if they have, for example, a program of digitizing manuscripts, so what they do is they break the manuscript into many small pieces, and they give you a real letters from a real manuscript to type in. So they've managed to kind of type in millions of characters of words that otherwise they would need to have people sit down and type them in. So I'll use this example for a moment to talk about something I think characteristic of a task unification. If I said before that there's a cliche that says think out of the box, and we want to break that cliche, there's another cliche that says there's no such thing as a free lunch. So task unification is actually the proof that there is such thing as a free lunch, because the idea in task unification is that you are utilizing a resource that is there anyway, but the reason that you didn't utilize it in a new way before is that you had a functional fixedness. So if you manage to break the functional fixedness, you get, so to speak, the free lunch. Yes, please.
Yeah, I mean, I like what you're saying about thinking inside the box, and I practice that quite a lot. But what happened with all those kind of solutions is like how you make those solutions sustainable. Because for the campaign, in the short term, they work, but how you make that sustainable over the years, and how you make non-sustainable in a way of the idea moving on, but to monetize the idea in a way that people can really understand that. Because what happened with interesting ideas is like, oh, wow, great, but the challenge sometimes in social enterprise is how you make it long enough so you really cause an impact in people that really need that sort of consequence in their life.
First of all, I agree completely that, by the way, it's not only true of social enterprises, it's true about any type of enterprise. The original idea is the easy part. The difficult part is making it sustainable. I think that breaking functional fixedness and looking for existing resources is actually especially helpful when you want to make something sustainable, because the advantage is that you make use of something that by definition is there. So, by the way, when we teach what we call characteristics of inventive solution, one of the interesting characteristics of an inventive solution is that it uses the resources that are there, and sometimes the famous example is, I used to work a lot with teachers. What does a teacher do when there's a student who is especially kind of energetic, but in a negative way? It kind of makes a lot of trouble. What's the old trick of teachers? No, that's just the regular way. But the trick way is you make this kid in charge of discipline or of other kids, or you give them a role. So actually, that's an example of a specific subfamily of task unifications, where the resource that you use is the cause of the problem. So the most elegant solutions are when you can identify the cause of the problem and use that as a resource. I want to show you in a moment a last example, because our time is nearly over. But before that, I'd like to ask you to stand up again, please. And again, try to be really quick. Look around. Find another pair of eyes that you haven't seen before and pair up with that person, please. Instead of wasting your break and talking with people you know, continue with these new people that you've met now. But what 3 task unifications I'm doing now? Right now I'm doing 3 instances of task unification. Standing on a chair. Standing on the brown bag, which is to solve a problem with the first task unification, so as not to dirty the chair. And what's the third one? that I'm doing with you right now. Exactly. I'm giving the audience the task of teaching each other stuff, which makes a lot of sense, actually, because no matter how much I'm supposed to know, you guys collectively know much more. So notice that each one of these task unifications is a bit difficult to do in a sense, because it's not proper to stand on a chair, and that's not why they gave me the bag. And some people get annoyed that I give them the task to be the teacher, because supposedly they brought me in so that so it's very common that when you break some fixedness, you step on toes. And that's another strong reason why it's done much less than people. Why declaratively everyone wants you to be innovative and but in practice not so much. And I'll mention something. I was talking yesterday, I was in Washington, D.C., talking to a large consultancy that does many interesting projects, some of them with us in many countries, social projects. And I mentioned that in a sense, you find sometimes that social organizations are even more fixed in their ways than business organizations. I don't know if you've had this experience, which is really a pity, because you would expect people to be more open, more with pure motivations. But actually, and it's interesting to analyze why, and there's probably various reasons, but one of the reasons is that the advantage of a business, regular business, is they're there to make money. So they know whatever makes more money is a good thing. So if you convince me that doing things upside down will bring me more money, I'll do them. And doing good organizations, the motivations are much more complex. So you're much more married to the reasons you do things, and therefore sometimes to the way you do things. And so your challenge in the social area is sometimes even bigger in terms of creating innovation. So I want to end with a short 30-second, I think, or 45-second video that talks not directly about what we talk now, but you'll see in a moment why it's very relevant. So please sit down. But make sure you sit down or stand in a way that you see the screen well. And with this we will end because the time is up. Everyone ready for the video? It's a Canadian one. Changed. You can too. And the connection, and with this I finished, that people think innovation is about the new iPod, the new product, but it's really not. Innovation, at least philosophically, and the way I believe and we practice, is about the ability to change one's way of thinking and to translate it into new and different kind of actions. So thank you very much for your patience.